I launched the poll. Hello, welcome. Um, we're still assembling. We'll give participants a couple more minutes before we start. During this time, please fill out the poll and we'll start shortly. Hi, Tanya. We can wait for one more minute and we can start the webinar. Okay, looks like everyone has filled out the poll. Question number 1, what level gardener are you? It looks like 53% of the answer is intermediate. I have gardened before and looking to learn more. And 29% is beginner, looking to learn everything gardening related. And 18% is advanced. I eat, I sleep, breathe gardening. That's pretty good. Hopefully you can learn a lot from this webinar and specifically in native plants. Question number 2, what percentage of your garden or landscape is native plants? 38% is less than 25%. 25% of the answer is 25 to 50. And 13 is 50 to 75%. 13% is 75 to 100. Oh, that's really nice. I would love to see 100% native garden. And 13% is not sure. Question number 3, why did you sign up for today's class? A lot of us wanted to learn more about native plants. You're in the perfect place. We'll talk a lot about native plants, their benefit, and how they benefit our habitats. And 40% is to help my garden thrive. 53% is looking for ways to conserve water. 20% is interested in stormwater pollution prevention, and 20% is joining for fun. Question number 4, how did you hear about the webinar? 57% heard from City of Sunnyvale social media, 0% is flyers, and 20% Basket website, 27% other. And last but not least, question number 5, where are you joining from? And splitting half and half, 47% from City of Sunnyvale, 53% from other Bay Area city. Cool. Now I'll end the poll. Okay. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. Good evening, everyone. I'm Claire from the City of Sunnyvale, and I'll be moderating for tonight's program, along with our co-sponsor, Basca, and our instructor, Juanita Salisbury. I want to welcome all of you to our class. Before we begin the program, I am going to provide some guidelines for successful participation in the webinar. First, all attendees are muted by default to reduce the background noise to the presentation. If you would like to ask a question, you can do so in 2 ways. First option is to use the raise hand feature. I will then call upon you and unmute you to ask your question. Second option is to type your question in the Q&A. I will then read questions to the instructor or respond directly in the chat. This illustration shows where you can find the raise hand button and the Q&A button. I'd also like to note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website. Now that we have that out of the way, I would like to share a little background on Basca Landscape Education Program. Basca is a special district that represents the interests of 26 cities, water district, and private water companies, all of which purchase wholesale water from the San Francisco regional water system. Basca member agency collectively serve over 1.8 million residents and 40,000 businesses in San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Alameda counties. Basca's goal is to ensure a reliable supply of high-quality water at a fair price for our agencies and their customers. Consistent with that goal, Basca provides a regional water conservation program to support our agencies in improving water use efficiency. The Landscape Education Program is one element of that conservation program. While we have made significant strides in our water use efficiency in the past decade, there is still more room for improvement. Outdoor water use represents the single largest untapped opportunity for water conservation in the Basca service area. Outdoor water use reduction through the use of water-efficient plants and innovative techniques can help conserve water and ensure that future water supply needs our communities are met. A few highlights on additional conservation programs that may be interest to you. Valley Water has several ring barrel rebate options, as you can see here. You can get up to $35 for installing a ring barrel, 50 cents a gallon for installing a cistern, and $1 per square foot of a rain garden. Bosca has a newly redesigned landscape rebate program, which provides rebates to customers of participating water agencies for replacing water-intensive lawn space with water-efficient landscaping. Bosca also has the I Heart Great Water program, which gives residents up to $200 in rebates for connecting a washing machine to a great water irrigation system. Next, there's the Bosca Lawn Begun rebate, which gives residents various rebates for transforming their lawns and making them more water efficient. A new addition for Bosca is the Smart Controller program, which provides instant rebates and heavily discounted pricing on purchase of the Retro 3 irrigation controller. This controller can be operated on your smartphone and normally retails for $280. Through this program, customers of participating water agencies can purchase a controller for $100 plus tax. For more information or to find out which of these programs are available in your area, visit bayareaconservation.org. The City of Sunnyvale encourages you to participate in rebate programs offered by Valley Water. We offer $2 per square foot of rebates for replacing your lawns and plants that require a lot of water with drought-tolerant plants or permeable hardscape. We also offer up to $200 in rebates for properties that connect a clothes washer to great water irrigation system. In order to qualify for these rebates, please make sure you apply first. Common mistake is that residents get excited about the rebates and start transforming their lawn before making sure that they qualify. Also, are you looking for compost? Free compost and mulch are available for Sunnyvale residents at their Smart Station. Stop by Monday through Sunday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with your own shovel and container. Additional information on water-wise gardening can be found on southbaygreengardens.org, where they also have some landscape designs and templates as well. It is a great way to get some ideas before you go ahead and apply for those rebates. Here is a snapshot of the Water-Wise Gardening website. It provides resources to support residents in water-efficient landscape renovations and management. Resources include a gallery of gardens with plants identified, plant selection tool, and even a watering calculator. If you enjoyed tonight's program, we invite you to check out our upcoming webinar classes. You can view the full schedule and register at bayareaconservation.org. If you are interested in staying up to date with Sunnyvale's Environmental Services Department, make sure to subscribe or follow us on social media. Feel free to scan the QR codes for search using the green text provided. We share tips and tricks for living sustainably in Sunnyvale, as well as rebate information and upcoming events. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our instructor, Juanita Salisbury. After growing up in the rural Willamette Valley in Oregon, Juanita studied psychology in college and eventually receiving a PhD in biopsychology from the University of Florida in 1988. Later, she obtained a Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture from West Virginia University in 2000, graduated with summa cum laude. In 2009, she established Juanita Salisbury Landscape architecture after working for commercial and residential design firms. In 2016, she established the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden, the first of 8 California native plant habitats in Palo Alto. Her focus is to research and educate about these habitats, as well as exploring opportunities to install more of them. And in about 2020, she joined the Friends of Palo Alto Parks. Juanita, thank you so much for joining us today, and please take it away. I
Thank
will
you.
stop
Yes,
sharing.
thank you very much, Clara. Let me share my screen. And we will do the slideshow from the beginning. Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Always appreciate people taking time out of their evenings to listen to the information about native plants. Um, as Claire mentioned, I did start the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden back in 2016, and we have a social media presence on Facebook and Instagram, Primrose Way Pollinator Garden, also YouTube, Primrose Way, and we also have a website, primrosewaypollinator.garden.com, if you don't do social media. And this has links to this map where you can check out the location of our gardens. Uh, we have a number of different ones. So here's Embarcadero Road here in Palo Alto. The first of the gardens was the Primrose Way Garden here. This is Lewis Road, so it's right as you come into town. Embarcadero Road going down to the Gwynda Street Garden, then up Newell Road to the Hopkins Avenue Garden, a little cul-de-sac garden here, the Arcadia Place Pollinator Garden, the Island Drive Pollinator Garden, and then if you continue down Newell here, there's the West Greenwich Place Pollinator Garden. Further down, we have the Churchill Street Pollinator Garden and Gwynda. And these two gardens are being connected via our Pollinator Corridor project, which is underway. So lots to do, and I'm just going to make the plug right now. I'm always looking for volunteers because this is a lot. There's 8 different gardens to work on. So if you like gardens and like getting seeds and cuttings and seedlings, those are abundant and available to our volunteers. So what am I talking about tonight? When I started these gardens, I knew less than I know now. And so what I know tonight is a culmination of over 8 years of maintaining and developing these gardens. And so I'm going to give you the strategies that have grown out of the 8 years and the things I have learned. And one of the big strategies that I'm going to talk about is to try to use the strategy that nature uses. And when you use nature strategies, you can maximize success, biodiversity, and water saving. And the key to all of that, I'm going to talk a lot about keystone species and pioneer species as a strategy for making your gardens really thrive. And we're going to be discovering their unique roles that these plants play in building a really resilient ecosystem. I'll talk a bit about plant selection strategies, learn how to choose the right native plants for your space and your goals. So one size doesn't fit all, so you have to decide what it is that your goal is. And then we're going to talk about the essential functions of native plants, explore how these plants provide critical food and habitat for local wildlife. We're going to look at the whole system. We look at the plants, but the plants are connected to everything else, and understanding those connections is really key, I think, in a successful native plant garden. We'll talk about those best practices, and we'll have some practical tips for establishing and maintaining a thriving water efficient garden. And then all of these things work together to create that dynamic landscape. And I'll show you how great it is to embrace that ever-changing beauty of your native garden as it evolves over time, because plants are alive. They are not static creatures. Um, they do develop over time, and they're not just like statues. They are dynamic creatures, living creatures. So let's talk first about the Keystone and Pioneer partnership. So keystone species are basically the backbone of a mature ecosystem, providing essential resources and supporting a wide range of wildlife. Then we have our pioneer species, which are the trailblazers, rapidly colonizing disturbed areas and creating conditions for other plants to thrive. And when you use both of these things, tip number one, both plants together, both pioneer and keystone species, planted at the same time, you can have those things work together. So the pioneer species will help prepare the stage, while keystone species ensure the long-term stability and biodiversity. And so using those two together as you start a garden creates a balanced approach. And it leads to more resiliency and sustainability. So they really tie themselves together and give each other their strengths. So let's first talk about pioneer plant species. This is at the Primrose Way Garden in the strip between the sidewalk and the street, in which we have poppies and gilia and phacelia growing here. And just showing you how abundant that looks. That's how it looks in April. One of the key functions of pioneer plant species are soil stabilization and erosion control. So they really get in there and help fix your soil. And they do that also by nutrient enrichment, by nitrogen fixation, by the leguminous types. They attract pollinators and beneficial insects, so creating more seeds over time. And they provide early stage food and habitat for wildlife because they get in there quickly and can provide cover and food. And so they also create favorable microclimates, shade, wind, and wind protection for other plants. So oftentimes around the pioneer species, if I plant other plants right at the base of those pioneer species, those plants will thrive better, those other plants, than if they would if they were out by themselves. So the pioneer species often have a nurse role to other plants. And so the benefits for your garden is that those pioneers will jumpstart the ecosystem development. They improve soil health and fertility. They reduce weed pressure. I mean, there's still some weeds in here, but relatively few. It attracts wildlife and increases biodiversity, and it helps facilitate the establishment of keystone species. So an example of a pioneer species are poppies, our state flower. And they, as I said before, they're the first to colonize disturbed or barren area. Uh, and poppies are very hardy. They can thrive in harsh conditions, such as poor soil and limited water. So a great way to get some color and benefits for wildlife is to just sow some poppy seeds. And they're very drought tolerant. They're very adapted to our dry Mediterranean climate, and they can establish themselves relatively quickly. Sometimes they don't sprout the first year. Sometimes seeds will wait, but within 2 years, you will have a lot of poppies. And when I say a lot of poppies, they're very prolific in their seed production. And like I said before, sometimes the seed can remain dormant for years and then germinate when conditions are favorable, generally when it rains. And by colonizing disturbed areas, California poppies help stabilize the soil, prevent erosion, and create conditions that are more suitable for other plants to grow. They play an important role in the process of ecological succession, which is the gradual change in species composition of a plant community over time. And you can see I've got a couple of different kinds of poppies here. We've got just a straight orange species, and then this one with this orange star in the middle. This is the coastal species that I love. And I like to use these. I like the color better. to have some of this beautiful yellow with this beautiful orange in the center. And the coastal species actually live longer than the straight orange species because they have a deeper taproot. So these can be more perennial than the straight orange species. More examples of pioneer plant species. Lupins. Let's talk about lupins. So many different kinds of lupins that we have. They're vibrant. Some are tall, some are short. Here, not exactly sure what this particular one is that we have. I think this is over at the Island Drive Garden. With their tall spikes of colorful bloom, they are well known for their ability to thrive in disturbed areas and improve soil quality by fixing nitrogen. Sometimes people say, I don't know where to start. I tell people you want to get your soil ready to continue to plant things over time, and sowing those handfuls of not poppy seeds, but lupin seeds is a great, easy way to get started. Another plant that I love using because it just is super hardy and can thrive on next to no water is the coyote brush, the Baccharis pilularis. And this is part of our corridor project here. I've got a variety here that's very, very low growing. And it's an evergreen shrub, which means it keeps its leaves all year round. And it's a common sight in coastal scrub and chaparral communities. And it's so highly adaptable, and it can quickly colonize areas after disturbances like fires or landslides. And this is the Twin Peaks variety. An interesting thing about coyote brush is that it's dioecious, so you have male and female plants, and most of the plants that you get in nurseries are going to be males. The females are the ones that create the fluff, and we often have female plants, the wild ones, seeding into our gardens, and I leave the wild females to be in the gardens because I like to have a balance. Another great pioneer plant species are the eriogonums, the buckwheat species. And it's a huge genus of plants. There's so many different kinds. My number one favorite buckwheat here is Eriogonum latifolium. This is our coastal buckwheat. Um, the buckwheats range from those low growing ground covers to tall shrubs, and they're often found in arid and rocky landscapes. They're excellent for stabilizing soil and providing food and shelter for pollinators. The eriogonums are great food for the larvae of butterflies. The Ackman blue butterfly uses the Eriogonum latifolium, and I see those butterflies now every summer around July because they lay their eggs on this particular one. So let's talk about fixing your soil. Nitrogen. Fixing nitrogen is a process where certain plants and bacteria capture the nitrogen from the air. There's a lot of nitrogen floating around in the air, and they convert it into a form that enriches the soil. And this essential nutrient then becomes available to other plants in the ecosystem, providing overall biodiversity and ecological health. So the things that fix nitrogen, like the lupins, like the ceanothus, like the redbuds, very useful to get things started. And it doesn't just help plants grow, it's a critical component of chlorophyll, the green pigment that allows plants to capture sunlight and turn it into energy. And without nitrogen, the magic of photosynthesis would not be possible and life on Earth would not exist. So how do you identify a pioneer species? And I've got a great picture here of one of the northernmost parts of the Point Reyes seashore up on a dune. And we've got pioneer species, poppies, coyote brush, and lupins. And so these are helping other plants to survive. And like this is one of our native thistles, the native cobweb thistle. But identifying a plant as a pioneer species involves considering several key characteristics and researching their ecological role. Habitat preference. Pioneer species often live in very poor conditions such as disturbed soil, rocky areas, or recently burned landscapes. They're adapted to low nutrient levels, so if your soil is really terrible, pioneer species will love it. Drought and intense sunlight. So the harshest thing you could possibly imagine, the pioneer species will do well. You can look at their seed dispersal mechanisms. Pioneer species typically have really efficient seed dispersal mechanisms, such as windborne seeds, seeds that attach to animals, or seeds that remain dormant for long periods until conditions are favorable for germination. Lots of different strategies that plants use to be able to get their foothold in there so they can reproduce. They often exhibit rapid growth and reproduction. Pioneer species often uh, do these things, allowing them to quickly establish themselves in open areas and outcompete other plants like weeds. They are great for soil stabilization and improvement. Again, they add organic matter in addition to fixing nitrogen and preventing erosion. And they facilitate succession because they pave the way for other plants to uh, colonize those areas. They create shade, help the soil, and attract pollinators and seed dispersers. So these are really the catalysts to kind of get things started. Now, adding to the mix here of those pioneer species, you want to add the keystone species at the same time that you're planting. So you're going to try to get those two kinds of plants when you first establish your garden or incorporate them into your existing garden. And you can do that simultaneously. And so what is a keystone species? Now we're switching gears over to a different kind of plant. A keystone species, for both plants and animals, they play a pivotal role in an ecosystem, supporting a disproportionately large number of other species. And so without it, the entire ecosystem would be dramatically different or might even cease to exist. And these species have what you call low functional redundancy, meaning that no other species can fully replace their ecological niche. So they provide something very unique and very special. Not a whole lot of other plants can do what they do. And so the takeaway here is when you plant multiple special plants like that, those multiple keystone species, you end up with a lot of redundant systems here. And that high functional redundancy then adds protection to your ecosystem stability because these plants provide backups to each other. So if one thing fails, you have a whole bunch of other things sort of holding up the entire ecosystem. Some of the benefits of planting native keystone species is their amplified impact. Remember, I said that they affect a huge number of other species. So one plant can affect hundreds of other things. So amplified impact. And they have that disproportionate impact on the overall health and diversity of an ecosystem compared to their abundance. So one plant has huge effects. And by planting them along with pioneer species, you jumpstart the development of your native plant habitat. In terms of adaptation, many keystone plants are particularly well adapted to the local environment. So planting them with pioneers allows them to establish themselves quickly, forming a foundation and fostering conditions suitable for other native species to live. They provide connections. So imagine if you're weaving things together, the more things are connected, they're harder to pull apart. Okay. So keystone species act as connectors environment, creating a ripple effect of connections throughout the environment. And those connections form a framework, and they create these living physical structures and niches that benefit a variety of other plant and animal species. And they're time saving, and one of my favorite things. And so by planting high impact keystone species with pioneers, you maximize the ecological benefit sooner. So basically instantly. So you leverage their power to create a network of ready-made connections. So they don't develop these connections over time. They are connected. So, you know what they say, if you plant them, they will come, meaning those organisms that use the plants. Super economical, you can achieve the maximal ecological benefits with limited resources and minimal effort, because one of the things I've learned over the years is to try to minimize the amount of work, but to really have a huge impact with the least amount of energy possible. And that's what keystones do. And scalability, the concept can be applied to gardens of all sizes. So even something in a pot is going to be connected to other things. So gardens of all sizes, whether it's a huge uh, preserve or a backyard, a garden around your patio, um, there's really, you know, there's no limit. It's whatever your space allows, a crack in the sidewalk even. Um, so the question is then, okay, what's the best way to plant and decide what to plant in terms of keystone and pioneer plant species? You want to get the ones that are local to your particular area, um, because nature has already perfected their role in their locations. That work's already been done for you. So all you have to do is choose the ones that grow in your area. And what to plant. So one of my go-to places for finding plants is to go, this is my go-to resource, is the calscape.org database. This website, and this is the old pictures, actually over 8,000 species now that we can choose from. They provide everything. They give you nursery information so you can like see if a nursery has the plant that you want. You can break it down. You can search by location for trees, shrubs, perennials, vines, succulents, bulbs, you know, all those things. See, it's super handy. That's like, and they have like tips like design inspiration. They tell you how to take care of things. So this is like my go-to resource. I tell people, and oh, they also have people who can design and install for you. Um, so there are people who do this sort of work. So it's really a one-stop shopping website. Another place that you can go, and this is a screenshot that I got from the National Wildlife Federation of Keystone native plants. And this is the Mediterranean California Ecoregion 11. And they have basically talked about a couple of different types of keystone plants, the ones that are um, the host plants, and then the ones for uh, specialist specialist feeders. So top keystone plant genera in the Mediterranean area, and they break it down by trees, shrubs, and herbaceous perennials. And then they break it down to by the top ones for butterfly and moth larvae, and um, the top ones for pollen and specialist bees. And this is just a screenshot. You can go to this website and take a look more closely at it. Super great resource to get you started if you're looking for trees, shrubs, or perennials or anything else. One of my favorite, and I always tell people, if you're doing a native garden, you probably should start with trees. Plant your trees first because you're going to get shade. Trees are great also at conserving water for you because of the things that they do. And nothing comes close to being better in terms of the best sort of keystone species than oaks. The valley oak, this is over at the Hopkins Avenue Garden. This is our valley oak, Quercus lobata. And the Santa Clara Valley used to be 61% of the tree cover here. Now I think it's down to 1%. So whenever I have a chance to plant one of these, I go for it. Um, they provide critical support to the entire ecosystem. They are deciduous, which means they drop all of their leaves each year, which, you know, leave the leaves under the trees because that supports the health of the tree. When plants drop their leaves, they're essentially fertilizing themselves. Leaves are, they're making their own manure. It's their own fertilizer. So you want to leave that leaf litter under those plants. A valley oak sends their taproots down into the water table. And here in Palo Alto, that's about 10 feet down, so it's pretty shallow. And then those taproots pull the water up, and then the lateral surface roots spread out the water and share it with other plants. So instantly doing more of the work for you. So really low level kind of effort for a huge impact. So this helps you with your irrigation needs. And things that you can plant underneath oak, Calscape talks about that, but you want to plant native plants like Monardella, which is coyote mint, smells like mint, pretty nice. And those are the best things to grow underneath oak trees because non-native plants can affect the health of the tree. These are insect factories transforming that sunlight into protein to feed countless birds and other species. Grows quickly and can live up to 600 years and adds value to real estate. Places that have nice mature trees tend to be more expensive um, and more valuable than places that are kind of barren and don't have a lot of um, sort of shade amenities and moisture amenities. Some of the things that I like to start with, and I'll talk about some of the trees in a moment, but starting with the trees again, go with your oak species, and there are a few different kinds. And if you don't have room for a big oak, you can go with a scrub oak, which is a smaller shrubby tree. That's easier for a residential yard. Acer species like maples, several different kinds. And one of the heavy hitters also are the cherry species, lots of different types of cherry trees. And here in my own yard, this is Prunus ilicifolia. And after I planted this, I stopped watering it because it does not like to be watered. So again, huge water saving by planting this. And look at how pretty these flowers are. Just a really great plant. Evergreen, has these green glossy leaves. So the glossy leaves, and design tip here, glossy leaves make things look nice and lush all the time because things don't look dried up. And then some of the shrubs that I like to use, and I use these over and over again because these are both keystone species as well as pioneer species. The Arctostaphylos species, like manzanitas, Ceanothus species, and this is a pioneer species because Ceanothus, otherwise known, people call them blue blossom, they fix nitrogen. Those buckwheats, the Eriogonum species, and then again, the coyote brush, Baccharis species. And because of those amplified effects of a keystone plant species, again, you could just start with just one in a planting season and then build on that. So huge effects with relatively small effort. Um, and if you want to get rid of your lawn, if you don't walk on your lawn, if you don't need a walkable surface necessarily, um, a ceanothus is a great way to replace your lawn. And this is one option I've used with great success. This is Ceanothus horizontalis, Yankee Point. Again, evergreen. Look how glossy those leaves are. It looks good all year round. It's about 15 inches tall, spreads out, has these beautiful blue blossoms on it, grows in sun or part shade, and can really help with that early ecosystem development because ground covers like this are shading the soil and keeping it cool. And cooler soils are just make for happier plants because when you have warmer soils, you can get bacteria that do bad things to plants and bad fungal growth. And so ground covers are great for shading the soil and keeping it cool. Another shrub that I really love, and these are plants that we use in our garden all the time, is Ceanothus species. One of my go-to Ceanothus species is Ceanothus maritimus, valley violet. And this starts blooming in January. And super low water use. And depending on how much sun it gets, it can be a little taller. It tends to grow more like a ground cover in shaded area and a larval host for dozens of butterfly and moth species. Yet another Arctostaphylos that I like, another manzanita. This is one of my favorites. Arctostaphylos densiflora, Howard McMinn. Again, it's evergreen, which means it doesn't drop all of its leaves all at once. The Arctostaphylos species supports 78 caterpillar species and 13 pollen specialist bee species. They also provide berries, nectar, and shelter for many other organisms. Really easy to take care of. What I love, because it's super showy in December, are the ribes species. And this is the one over at the Hopkins Avenue Garden, Ribes malvaceum, Christie Ridge. Super low water use, grows in partial shade. It does lose its leaves, but it then leaves out very quickly afterwards. Blooms for almost 2 months during the winter time, about 5 to 8 feet tall, 5 feet wide, and a host plant to 3 confirmed and 76 likely species of butterflies, moths and butterflies. And I love a pink flower, and these really just does not disappoint. It's a beautiful plant. So, how do you decide what to plant? And that's a question you should be asking yourself. How do I decide? What do you want the plants to do? I mean, we're talking about functions here. What do you need for your plants to do for you? Do you need shade? Do you need screening? Do you need a windbreak? Do you need ground covers? Do you want an accent? So consider the function that you need the plants to do for you. And I can't tell you what you need. Only you know what you need. Consider those attributes that will help you decide. The low water using and money saving plants that get in there, don't use water. You can get rid of your lawn and fire your gardener. Things that are low maintenance, that are long lived, so that they will last for 30 years. Do they smell good? Do you live somewhere that's there's something stinky nearby and you need a good fragrance? Do you like a certain color? Do you like certain textures, certain forms? All these questions, consider what it is that you want them to do and what attributes really appeal to you about specific plants. In terms of water use, you can go to this handy website, which is the water use classification of landscape species. It's an online searchable database for plant factors of individual plant species and is published by the University of California Cooperative Extension and the California Department of Water Resources. Basically, it tells you for any particular plant species in their database, what percent of water does it use as like using as a reference a turf lawn. So a turf lawn would be 100%, and then the plants that are very low water use are 0 to 10% of what a lawn would use. So that way you can decide, if you want a high water use plant or you like a one and it's like, oh, it's high water, maybe I'll go with something that's similar, but it's a medium water use. So this will help you sort out which plant that you want that's like very low water use. So that's a very useful website to just double check. Again, if you're going to start doing some updates to your garden, if you have natives already and you want to like supplement what you have and really kind of tie things together better, you might be thinking, okay, I want a tree. And I always tell people, consider trees first because of everything that they do for water conservation. What trees can you fit into the yard if there's existing trees or if there's not much space? And these are the dozen trees that I have in our tiny yard. And I have more. I've planted more since I made this slide. Um, and so, like I showed you before, the Prunus salicifolia, the hollyleaf cherry, wonderful, wonderful plant. Um, I have Acer macrophyllum, the big leaf maple, which is really just big and showy. Um, a great plant for a nice small tree for a side yard is the mountain mahogany. These actually grow up in the Foothill Park Preserve in Palo Alto. They don't get watered. So a lot of these plants, like the Prunus salicifolia, you can see up in the preserve as well, along with the Acer macrophyllum. Salix laziolepis, the arroyo willow. This is a high water use plant that I water by hand when I remember to. But willows used to grow in the area that I live in, more or less. And so I'm thinking that this plant has sent its roots down into the water table, so I don't really have to worry about it too much. I have elderberries. I have Acer negundo, the box elder. Our street tree is the Modesto ash. I have a nut tree, actually a couple of hazelnut trees. I have another prunus here. I have an Arctostaphylos, a big berry manzanita that grows into a tree form. This was taken a few years ago. This is now taller than I am. Um, the red buds, and I put cages around these things to keep the squirrels from digging them up until they establish. And then toyon. Toyon is a great small shrubby tree because they can give you a great screen if there's something that you don't want to look at. These are evergreen, and I don't water this at all. And so, super easy, has a nice red berry on it in the wintertime. They're getting their red berries now. If you go to our Gwynda Street garden, the ones there are full of red berries. Just lots of different choices. For shrubs, again, welcome to Juanita's yard. I've got Vaccinium ovatum. This is our native huckleberry. I've got coffee berry. Look how green and glossy that looks. Again, Prunus salicifolia can be shrubby. Again, heteromelies. Um, and then more ribes. So this is ribes viburnifolium. It's got a glossy leaf, and then a different Arctostaphylos as a ground cover. And when you want to fill in with shrubs, if you don't want to plant trees, try to shrub it up and aim for about 75% in your garden to have these shrubs as evergreen to keep the garden looking lush and moist. Again, love Vaccinium ovatum. It's evergreen with white flowers in February, turning into tasty blueberries in the summer. And these are very yummy. They are blueberries, uh, and they are low water and likely larval host to over 50 species of moths and butterflies. It makes a great upright right hedge, and it's the only native plant in my garden that I fertilize with cottonseed meal because that enhances the growth. It makes them grow much faster. So let's talk about those essential functions of plants. Uh, they are nature's transformers of starlight into life's tapestry. And so native plants, fueled by that starlight, transform the simple energy from the sun into the complex web of life, creating order and beauty. So uh, the energy from the sun is what we call uh, low entropy energy. It's highly organized, and that gets transformed into even more organization as it's pulled into the web of life. So the essential function of plants. Plants are the primary producers of food and the basis of food web. So you have energy from the sun getting transformed, converted by plants into food that is eaten by insects, like this guy here, this fat caterpillar, and other animals. And then those caterpillars get eaten by birds. And we have 37% of animal species are plant-eating insects. And as a rule, native insects only eat the native plants that they evolved with. This is one of the critical functions of plants that I think people understand, but it's really important to plant those things that are local to provide food for the local native insects. And so native plants efficiently channel the sun's energy into the food web in ways that non-native plants cannot. Insects are really picky eaters, so when this happens and the plants do that, it's eaten by the insects, and then the insects are eaten by the birds. With non-native plants, you're not getting birds because you're not getting the insects that provide the protein and um, other nutrients to create baby birds. So you're not really building complexity when you have an ecological dead end of a non-native plant. And not only are these providing protein, but they're also getting their moisture from plants. And so you have moisture being channeled yet into another place. So in living tissue, that's how organisms also get moisture. So you have moisture sharing through this biological vector of an insect, which I think is a really cool way of thinking about these bags of moisture moving around. So plants aren't decorations, plants are food. This means that native plants will, I guarantee they will attract many native pollinators and other insects, and then other things like birds. And so among other things, the keystone plants provide food for many more species than do other plants. And so when you go to the nursery and you're looking in the native plant section for just that right specimen, I always look for the one plant that is the most chewed up as possible because I know that that one tastes really good to somebody. And usually when I bring home a chewed up plant, that means I'm also bringing home some butterfly larvae. So I'm acting as a way to spread those insects around. So don't be afraid of some holes in the leaves because that means you will have butterflies. And so what's the implication of that? Because native plants will attract a variety of native pollinators and other insects, using best practices helps those insects complete their life cycles. So think of native plants as a buffet that you've set out for dinner guests. You don't want to kill your dinner guests before they can leave and go home. You want those dinner guests to complete their life cycles as well. So you want to have best practices to allow them to continue um, whatever they need to do to complete their life cycles. So those best practices, because native gardens are less maintenance than a non-native lawn, your work is going to decrease. And when when I tell you I look for labor saving things, I have 8 public gardens that I help manage. Um, I'm always looking for time savers. And so most of that, what we do is keep the weeds at bay. Um, and when we plant, we irrigate to establish the plants about once a week. And it is planting season now when the soil is cool and moist. When you do irrigate, you should encourage the roots to search for water deeply and just outside of the root ball. And roots are really good at finding water. So um, people talk about like watering on one spot and then the roots grow to that area. Watering in another spot, roots will grow to that area, and the roots follow the water around like a dog. Um, Prune sparingly to control dried up dead material for fire safety. You don't need to fertilize because again, those pioneer species will do it for you. Amend sparingly if your soil is really like clay, you can like use some amendments in there. Um, but really leverage what the pioneer species will do the work for you. So if your soil is really clay, you could start out with handfuls of lupin seeds and poppy seeds and wait for a season or two for those things to break up the soil for you. You'll want to mulch to control weeds initially and help establish the plants, and then mulch with leaves. Just leave the leaves. And if you don't like the way that looks, you think that's kind of messy, you can do it like a skim coat of bark chips on the top to make it look uniform, and that kind of holds everything in place. Um, Leave areas of bare dirt for nests. 70% of our native bees live underground. Um, don't use leaf blowers in planted areas. Again, this is like killing your dinner guests after you've invited them in with these native plants because larvae don't stay on the plants. When they overwinter, they drop down into the leaf litter. And that's where they hang out and hide from predators like birds who find them very tasty. Then they can complete their life cycles once spring arrives and the temperatures increase. And again, don't use pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. A quick thing about how to get some spacing. What I like to tell people to do to get an idea about how many plants to use is to use some graph paper to map out your area. And so one of these squares here can equal 1 foot. And so to start with, map out your area, draw in some pathways. And then once you have the pathways, the structure done, then show plants as circles at their mature diameter. And you can get the information about their mature diameter from Calscape. And trust me, these things will get to be at least the large size that they are supposed to. But you can get ideas about spacing because plants should overlap a little bit or just basically touch. And if you plant like in odd numbers, you get more of that sort of natural look as opposed to more symmetrical and formal look. Um, so that's the basics of plant layout, but it gives you an idea about like when you go to the nursery, you can go, oh, I need 7 of these, and I need 3 of those, and 3 of those, and 3 of these, and 7 of those. So that helps you figure out the number of plants that you need to get. Nesting and shelter, again, one of the things that uh, insects do is they spend a lot of time as an egg or a larva. Some can spend years underground as a larva or a pupa. Um, and the adult lifespan of insects is really short in general, just long enough to reproduce, and then it all starts all over again. And so when you think about those insects are actually storing water in their living tissues. So they're kind of like a biological rain barrel. So they're saving water for you. That's one of the benefits of native plants that are eaten by insects, is that you're putting water where it's supposed to be, inside living tissue. And then they then move it around the environment using various processes. So as a water saving technique, when you plant native, you're not only creating places for insects to get food and water, but you're also moving water around. You're enabling water to be moved around in biological tissue, which is kind of cool. Um, and, you know, the native plant gardens, as I mentioned before, are super dynamic. Um, you know, you end up with a lot of movement in gardens, and relationships between um, the plants themselves, the organisms that use the plants, their caretakers, that's you and me, and the overall structure of a garden changes over time. The gardens that we started out with don't look anything like the gardens that we have now. Things have grown to maturity. Some things didn't do well. Things have gotten replaced. Um, Plants kind of moved around to where they wanted to be in the environment. So be prepared to know that you are creating kind of like a super organism of all of these different species that are interacting with each other. And that is not going to stay static. That is going to change over time. Oh, oops, let me go back here. And so, and so what does that mean is when you think about planting a garden, it's like building a house. You have the pioneer plants laying the groundwork, like preparing the site and the foundation. And then the keystone plants are the strong walls holding up the whole structure. And then once you've got that kind of like the bare bones in there with the pioneers and the keystones, then you can add the other things, the floors, the doors, and the windows, and create that vibrant living home. And they're the pretty stuff that you want to add. One of my favorite plants that I like to use are the native bulbs that we have. We have so many bulbs to choose from. It's super easy. One are the Brodea californicas, and do love a pink flower. And this is Brodea californica, the pink form. And um, this is a wonderful plant, kind of like a daffodil, comes up in the spring, leaves come up, bloom spikes come out. You get these beautiful blossoms that last pretty long, and then they wither up and the bulbs go dormant, and those bulbs don't like water at all during the summer. So again, another water savings. So so what happens is that dynamic beauty uh, unfolds over time. And among the wonderful things provided when you plant native plants is that you're providing opportunities and resources for organisms to complete their life cycles. And so you want to allow time for biological processes to take place. And so what we have here is the mating dance between two Ackman blue butterflies. And I see this all the time. You have the male flitting around the female. And, you know, I always tell people plant native and get more love. And here it is. I, you know, truth is stranger than fiction. And so it's the lovely stuff that you get to see when you plant native. So some final thoughts. I know it's a lot, but if you take it step by step, um, and try not to do it all at once, don't feel compelled to do it all at once. Take it step by step, you know, plant a tree, plant a few shrubs, and then every year add more. Don't go for the finished garden because gardens are never finished. But by understanding the role of the pioneer species in laying the groundwork and the keystone species in providing the structure, you can unlock the full potential of your native garden, fostering an abundance of life and fulfilling your role as a steward of nature's intricate beauty. And it's not that hard. It's actually quite easy. Um, and if you are inspired, lots of great places to get native plants. And after this last rainstorm that we had, the ground is waiting. And with that, I will stop sharing and happily take any questions.
Thank you, Juanita. It's a really informative webinar. Does anyone have questions for Juanita? I do have two questions in the Q&A section. One question is that I don't see lupins in the pioneer species slide. Are there yellows? Are there yellow lupins? If not, what are the yellow flowers in the background? I believe it's talking about the slides when you show
Right.
the
If it was
lupins.
if it was the the point raised one. So there were lupins there as well as poppies and coyote brush. Um, there are absolutely yellow lupins. Lupins come in pinks and yellows and purples and blues, lots of different colors. Um, go to Calscape and take a look at the various lupin species. Um, Lupins are super easy. They're not terribly uh, long lived, but that's fine. They do what they need to do. But you would generally have lupins year after year coming back, especially if they don't if they die after a year or two. Some are annuals, some are short-lived perennials. So people always freak out. Oh, my lupin's dying. It's like, well, you know, they they do their thing and then they die. Um, let's see, are there native ground covers that we can walk barefoot on? Absolutely. Feels soft with high coverage, doesn't die. I like to use yarrow, Acamelia millefolium, which is nice. It does tend to go a little dormant that you can use. Another one that you can use is blue-eyed grass or Sisyrinchium bellum, which is actually a member of the iris family, and it looks like grass, but it's a very tough plant, super easy from seed, and you can actually just throw the seed down and it will grow. Um, and you can cut it down and it's really easy. We have it in a few of our gardens, and you can actually walk on it. Achillea and the blue-eyed grass are a couple of things that I use. Some people use Fragaria vesca, one of our native strawberries, that forms a ground cover um, that you can walk on. Um, any sort of low-growing thing like that. There's another one, Yerba Buena. Trying to remember the scientific name for it. Can't think of it right off the top of my head. Um, Plenipodium, is that right? Anyway, so check out Calscape for those things that you can walk on. But those are a couple things that come to mind for walkable native plants. Is now the right time to disperse poppy seeds? Absolutely, any time of year. Toss those suckers out there. Get them in there, and even if they don't come up this year, they'll come up next year. They'll be waiting for this stuff to come up. Mushroom question. I had an explosion of mushroom in my yard from the last several weeks. Dog finds them and gets sick. Oh, discourage the fungus, especially when you leave the leaves. Yeah, you know, dogs tend to eat stuff that they're not supposed to. And I'm sorry that your dog got sick. Any way to discourage fungus? Not really. I mean, you could use a fungicide, but that would sort of defeat the purpose of what some fungus do. Actually, what some fungus do is they form a symbiotic relationship with plants and give those plants moisture. So that's not really a good way to, try to discourage things, especially if you're looking to um, improve the health of plants, because the fungus and that's also that symbiotic relationship will uh, trade nutrients. So those will make your plants do better. What you might try doing are places where if you see mushrooms come up until they've released their spores and gone away, is put wire baskets over wire waste cans, just upend them and put them over where the mushrooms are coming up to keep your dog from getting to them. Um, I deal with squirrels all the time getting into the garden, digging things up, or I do a lot of plant propagation or digging in the pots. And so I use a lot of chicken wire and wire baskets to keep creatures out of the places where they are not supposed to be. Ah, I have a weed patch along the sidewalk covered with weed cloth and mold, not very deep. Any recommendations? To add more soils once I pull a weed? You don't have to really, I wouldn't, oh, the stinkhorn variety. Yes, the stinkhorns. Yeah, so cage up those mushrooms. Don't let the dog get to them. A patch along the sidewalk. So in our corridor project, we've got a section 9 feet wide, which is great. But some of the things that I've been planting in that um, really tough situation, people call it the hell strip for a reason, between the street and the sidewalk, is that coyote brush, the Twin Peaks variety, because it stays super low. So it doesn't block your view when you're like, trying to pull out of your driveway or anything like that. Some of the Arctostaphylos ground covers are excellent. One variety that I've been using with just a ton of success is the Arctostaphylos Carmel Sur. That one has been amazing to grow. Another one that I use that is a super tough plant and it's so hard to kill, but it looks good most of the time and has a pink flower, is Lysingea. And Lysingea grows on beaches. We have that all up and down the corridor. Um, and I planted it in places where we actually don't water anything, and that works really well. So those are three right off the top of my head that work really great. Somebody says, I'm worried about my fruit trees getting eaten by caterpillars. Do natives bring more caterpillars in the area that will eventually eat my fruit trees? This is a great question. And so what happens when you bring in natives is that you're bringing in um, a lot of biodiversity that's going to get eaten by things. But you know what every insect is? Every insect is another insect's meal. And so you will be bringing in predators to get those insects. What I've been noticing in our garden, our backyard garden, is that we have apple trees. And I had tried for years to keep the worms out of those. I tried bagging the individual apples, which is a pain in the butt to do if you've got like 100 apples in your tree. And then the squirrels just merrily rip the bags off. And so that didn't work. I've actually tried putting nets over the whole tree. Squirrels are like, oh, you silly human. I'm just going to pull that net right off and eat your apples. So what I discovered this year is that most of the apples did not have worms in them. And we had a lot of praying mantises in our garden. We have a lot of wasps, which wasps, people are afraid of them, but those wasps are carnivores and they are after those caterpillars. So just the opposite happens is that if they don't bring in more things that will eat your food because you'll be bringing in a balance of predators and prey. And those predators, they're looking for that protein meal. I mean, I've seen some gruesome things with the insects fighting over insects, and it can get pretty ugly out there. I actually saw two wasps pulling a katydid apart. They were like fighting. One had the head and one had the body, and you can imagine. So the more natives that you plant, the better balance you'll have, and actually the less your stuff will get eaten by other things.
Great. Thank you, Juanita. Are there any questions while we have her here? I do have a question about my coyote meat because are they deciduous? Because they kind of brown,
Yep.
and when I got them, it's like really green, and now they have no leaves, and then it looks like my soil have been dig from by other like species or something. So I was thinking, is it because like some animal dig up my soil, which makes it like look brown or something?
Yeah, so the Monardella species, the coyote mint,
Mhm.
it is deciduous and it looks bad right now before it leaves out again.
Uh,
And so that's why I used to use a lot of it in our gardens, but it can look pretty awful. Um, Unfortunately, it does feed birds because the seeds are really attractive to a lot of bird species. And I don't cut seed heads back until we start getting new blooms coming. Um, and so, yeah, so and the sticky monkey flower. Yeah, the sticky monkey flower. I mean, you can try watering them during the winter time, and they're just like, nope, nope. I'm waiting until spring to look pretty. Um, I have a lot of sticky monkey flower, and it can look pretty bad during the dry season. It's a great habitat plant. Thank goodness it's not the only stuff that I have that looks bad. I have a lot of stuff that looks good. So that's why I tell people to put in those evergreen plants so that the stuff that looks kind of dry and desiccated until it puffs up again with enough moisture, um, that you won't feel like a crappy gardener where everything is dead and dry looking, but you've actually got a nice mix of things. And so you have like a very dynamic symphony of colors and form happening over time. So yeah, so coyote mint, a great habitat plant, but I wouldn't put it as a majority plant. I would tend to go with, a lot of those evergreens like the Arctostaphylos, because they're just going to cover a multitude of those dry sins. The bare area around an oak tree that blew over from armillaria. One plant wildflowers to cover it. Absolutely. Um, yeah, that fungus, you have to be careful what you plant. So look and see what is not susceptible and plant something that's really resistant in those areas. Do I leave them or do I prune them down? Oh, Elizabeth, I am so lazy. I don't prune anything if I don't have to. And you know what? The thing about not pruning stuff is that the seed heads then attract all kinds of birds in there. And those birds are also eating insects and things like that. Um, and so, like, for example, on our white sage that we have, the Salvia apiana, the seed stalks are like 4, 5, 6 feet long. And they are just, they're dry. The flowers are gone. And I still have finches, and it's like, how can there still be anything there? So I'll wait for that to start blooming before I cut those back. But I don't cut things back all the way to the ground, especially if they have a hollow stem, because you know what likes to nest in hollow stems are bees. And bees, especially like the leaf cutter bees, if you leave about the last foot or so of a hollow stem, the females will go inside and lay their eggs on top of each other. Um, and it's really great for them because once things start blooming, they've got food and like pollen and nectar to feed their baby bees with, so they can go back and forth really quickly to where their nest is. So for cutting things back, basically when we cut back things in our gardens, because they're habitats, is to keep the pathways clear mostly, um, and to keep sight lines available for people where we need to, but we try to minimize that. So I try to plant things that really don't require a ton of maintenance. And a garden to really see that whole philosophy in action is the West Greenwich Garden, which we planted fairly recently. And I was like, this was like our sixth or seventh, and I was like, I'm literally like, I need more volunteers because there's only one way to I have volunteers, but it's still a lot. And so it's like, how can I reduce the amount of work? That garden is great. The one plant that we do have to trim back, that I like to trim back anyway, is there's a plant called Encelia californica, which blooms 10 months out of the year, and it can get huge. That thing can get 8 feet wide. And I do cut that back a couple of times a year in my own yard because it just gets in the way. And so, but it's super vigorous and it like springs back. It's like 6 feet wide again in a month. So I do cut it back, but I try to be very judicious about it. Um, but you have to think about what your situation is like. I don't like to, if I do pruning, I don't like to do it all at once because um, I don't like to disrupt the structure of the garden for the organisms that live there. So it'd be like somebody coming in and might sound great if somebody came in and cleaned your house, but then you'd be like looking for where did the saucepan go? Or, where did my green socks? And you're looking in all the drawers. And, we have a big brain, insects have small brains. So I don't like to change things too much too quickly. So a little bit at a time, which also aligns with my philosophy of not working too hard. So little chunks at a time.
Great. Are there any questions? It is a really informative um, presentation,
Thank
and
you.
I'm kind of more relaxed about my coyote meats now. I was
Great.
like, oh, should I throw it away or what? But now I know
So,
it's
yeah,
deciduous,
yes. So
as well as sticky monkey flower too. My sticky monkey flower went brown too.
yep, yep. And the thing is that they will oftentimes sprout up from the roots, even if the top looks completely dead. And some native plants are just like really kind of tricksy like that. They like, oh, we're dead. And like, and so you think it's dead, you forget about it, and you come back and there's this huge bush. And that's one of the things that they do to conserve moisture is that they die completely away or they get really like really dried up. And then they puff out all of a sudden when the moisture comes. But that's just their adaptation. It's how they have perfected over millennia in dealing with, like no rain, no rain, some rain. And, don't fall for their tricks.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I think if there's no more question, then I think that's it for tonight. Thank you for everyone joining for our webinar. Thank you, Juanita, for the presentation and all the beautiful native plant flowers and pollinators. It's great photos.
Oh, my pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Great. So hope everyone have a great night, and I'll go ahead and end the webinar. Goodbye.
Bye.